All right, good evening. Today is January 11th, 2021, and you are watching the FinCom Finance Commission meeting. Information regarding our meetings is posted on the website. The meeting is being recorded by Norwood Community Media for future broadcasts. Just a couple of notes before we start the formal agenda. It's only been a few weeks since our last meeting, but we've been doing really well at these meetings when you need to speak, indicate to me, raise your hand, and otherwise, if people can keep their microphones muted, it will cut down on crosstalk, and it will also make for a productive meeting. So we have an agenda this evening, several items, and I'll speak to the agenda in the morning. There are some changes I just want to give a heads up to regarding everything we'll be speaking to tonight. But I thought before we begin the formal agenda, I asked Tony if he could just give us a brief briefing, if you will, on today's distribution of vaccinations to our public safety staff. I think these days, we live in a world right now where sometimes good news is hard to come by, and I saw this as good news came by Norwood today, and we have to celebrate those small good news stories. And I asked him to do that, and I think at the end of it, I think we'll all really feel that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Tony is going to share his screen and talk about today's event, and then we'll get into the formal agenda if that works for everybody.
Excellent. And Tony got a haircut. Looks nice.
You did. Thank you. Everyone will give me just a moment here.
Yeah.
And if everyone can see this, I will start off with some AV content here.
Sure. The chief doesn't even wince.
I saw this on Facebook tonight, Tony. It was great.
Yeah, we made sure that we turned it into as much of a media spectacle as we can. I do have a video of Chief Brooks as well, and his reaction was similar to Chief Maurice's, that it was, let me stop sharing my screen here, that was it. All of this comes down to that, a quick little prick in the side, and then you are good. Sorry, I have this playing on loop. We were lucky that we were able to coordinate, not just for Norwood, but for 10 communities in our area. Norwood is serving as the lead distributor of vaccine for public safety for our NC8 region, as well as 2 other communities. So when we actually got our shipment in early last week, we received over 800 doses, enough to distribute to our entire region. That's a credit to Sagal and her team for being able to do that. We began our first responder clinic today. We had 30 people vaccinated today. We anticipate all first responders being vaccinated by the end of this week. And then following up in 28 days, we'll run the same program for 5 days to be able to have them all get their second shot. The state's given us about 80% of our allocation. We let them know today we'd like the remaining 20% by the end of the week so that we can go forward with all of our first responders being vaccinated by the end of the week. It's been a long time coming. I think, as everyone knows, COVID hit us early and hard here in Norwood, but it's not the end, but it's the beginning of the end. And we're going to be moving forward, continuing public safety today. You've seen a few other towns that may have done it a couple days ahead of us. Those were towns that didn't follow the rules. We're following the state's regulations to a T. First responders were not allowed to begin till today, so we began first responders today. I know about 9 million people have emailed, called, or texted me and asked where they can get their vaccine and do we have any left over. It's coming for everyone. It's just going to take time. And the good news, in addition to we're finally seeing the beginning of the end here, is that we've been in talks with the state to hopefully allow us to continue the rollout at the local level, moving towards education and utility and essential workers as well. So we're hopeful that will start soon. But Chief Maurice and Chief Brooks both got their shots today, and they're both feeling fine. It took all of 2 seconds. It was quicker in some cases than even getting your flu shot. I think both of those videos you'll see online, if you haven't already. There'll probably be some media coverage tonight, and they are ready and raring to go, and they're both feeling fine. And none of them have had a second head or anything pop up. So we're happy. This was a long day coming. I shared a video on my my Facebook page of us unboxing the vaccine because we were so excited and we were waiting all week for it to be here. And on the one hand, you're excited that it's finally here. On the other hand, it's like, here's this little box. It looks like some other Amazon delivery that came in, and it's like, oh God, it's our vaccine. And we, public health did great with it. So we are there. People are beginning to be vaccinated against COVID, and pretty soon it will just be a bad memory.
I also just would make an observation that I've been listening to radio reports in NPR recently, and I've heard Segal on a couple of stations. Segal is the head of the Public Health Association, I guess, for the state, and several times in the last 2 weeks, she's had a brief interview on public radio, and it's great to see that Norwood has such a well-respected public health leader, and she's not only helping the town, but leading the state association as well. It's great. Any comments before we move forward? Kelly.
Sorry, finding my mute button. So this is great news. Like, this is so super exciting. I can't even tell you. My question was going to be, you mentioned, frontline workers who aren't necessarily first responders. That probably I'd call them second responders, right? Most specifically the teachers. When do we think it would be possible, or do we have any timing on when it might be possible to get them vaccinated so they're not at risk anymore?
Sure. So our goal, and remember, we're not entirely in charge of when we get the vaccine, but our goal is for kids to possibly be back in school, normal or whatever that is, after the April vacation. And that's based on the preliminary timeline that we've seen, that we think we should be able to start teachers in February. They're at sort of the beginning of that second phase. So right now we're moving on to first responders and then congregate care sites. And then that next phase, we believe teachers will be at that stage. So our hope is that if we can start teachers in roughly the middle of February, that you give it a 2-week period roughly to do all the schools. And we think we can do it in 5 days. That's assuming that the state calls us and says, how many people work in the school system? We say it's 500, 600, and they give it to us. We will move heaven and earth and get it done in 5 days for all of our teachers and support staff. Then by mid-February, so between the middle of March and the middle of end of March, they'll be getting their second dose. And then as of the beginning of April, we, assuming the state relaxes some of their guidelines, the goal would be come back from April vacation and things will be as normal as they ever would be. And then it would just be up to parents to decide whether they wanted their kids in 5 days a week or whether they wanted the to be able to just do the remote learning academy. Obviously, the state would have to change a couple of their guidelines about distancing and everything for students to be concerned about the spread, but we know that the spread among younger individuals is relatively low risk compared to teachers. That's who we'd want to protect, the teachers and the support staff, of course. So that's the goal. As long as they ship us the vaccine, we just need a couple hundred doses. We're going to get it done.
So Tony, if that happens, you will personally get the largest fruit basket possible from the Numi Giblin family.
We have already said that is the goal. We want to do it. And we've already been developing our plans to say we're doing it in 5 days. You will, if they just tell us they will ship us the vaccine, you will see a mobilization unlike you've seen in a while to get us into those buildings and get it done.
Very good. All right. So with that, I'll turn now to the formal agenda. I see that we have the full complement of FinCom meetings. We have more than a quorum. All 5 members are attending, and I also want to recognize folks that are on our meeting this evening. We have Molly Ahern, in addition to Tony. We have Tom McQuaid, and we have Dave Hajar and Kathy Carney. Welcome, everyone. So in terms of the agenda, folks, if I could, I'd like to just see if the commission would like to just switch it up a little bit. First note is that Hilltop Securities is not here tonight. They're not able to attend today's meeting. So that first agenda item, the follow-up from the Hilltop Security meeting of last month, that will be we'll need to have that at a future meeting, hopefully our next meeting. And an additional item to this evening's agenda is a reserve fund transfer. Hopefully all the members got the detail. And then we can get into our discussion. I'm going to suggest then we talk about our special town meeting financial articles coming up, and then the rest of the agenda after that. So with that, does the commission, would we like to handle the reserve transfer right off the bat so that we can, I think it's a short item. I think we can get through that relatively quickly. Okay. So, all right, everybody's okay with that. So there is a reserve fund transfer. The information that was presented to us on email. I don't know if you guys have anything you can bring up on screen, but if you recall, there was an incident or a vehicle incident at the airport recently. As the airport manager's letter explains, this vehicle intruded upon airport property, went through and badly damaged a security gate at the airport. And at this time, they are requesting a reserve fund transfer of $35,000 for the repair and replacement of the equipment for that gate. Is there anything else we need to add to that? I mean, as I understand it, Tony and Tom, that ultimately this is reimbursable through insurance, is it not? This is just a need to meet that.
Correct. We are hoping to receive reinsurance. We're hoping to receive insurance. It actually, the individual who caused the damage, it's their insurance who should be ultimately covering this. You never know how long that's going to take or when that's going to actually happen, but the gate is down. It is an emergency need, and we just don't have an appropriation. And the airport budget itself actually being relatively small, this is sort of one of those perfect reasons of why we have the reserve fund is, oh, it's an emergency. We need to go and get something done right away. But we're hopeful that we should get damages from insurance.
Sorry, I can't find the email, sorry. I was looking through the agenda and I didn't see that on there, so I missed it.
Yeah, it was it came over the weekend as an additional agenda item. But the request is $35,000 to replace the damaged security/access control system. For the expenditure of these funds, $28,547 would be used to replace the gate and gate operator system, with the remaining funds to replace the damaged security camera and to restore connectivity between the gate operator camera, and access control card reader. So that's the detail, and Russ has included the estimate for Metropolitan Gate Systems for the repair and replacement of that equipment. Are there any questions from the FinCom on that particular request?
Hope so moved.
Alan has moved. Kelly has seconded. I will take a roll call vote on the reserve transfer of $35,000 from the reserve fund to airport. Kelly Newmy,
Yes.
Judy Langone,
Yes.
Alan Slater,
Yes.
Ann Haley,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes as well. So that's unanimous. The next item is the special town meeting coming up on February the 4th. And as we're getting, if you guys can get the list up, we should just mention, obviously, hopefully folks are aware of the upcoming trainings for the Zoom virtual town meeting coming up starting as early as, I think, starting next week. Wednesday of next week is the first meeting, first training. I've been able to get on some of the Monday calls and so forth over the last couple of weeks, and I think it's coming. I think the webinar, the Zoom webinar system is coming together very nicely. Tony, I've been impressed with the Metropolitan Planning Agency staff. I think they're doing a nice job funneling through, working with us in terms of how to manage a virtual town meeting, and it's quite the challenge. But I have to say, after going to a few meetings, I've got pretty good confidence that we're going to have a good meeting using the platform.
I agree. Just if anyone, briefly, if you want me to just get into it, we are planning the remote town meeting. We'll be using Zoom webinar. 5 training sessions have been set. Town meeting members will have received them in the mail this week, and you'll be receiving an email address if you're a town meeting member at the end of this week with the specific logon information for those training sessions. And as Bob said, MAPC, we brought them on. They helped Stoughton and Dedham through theirs, so they'll be coordinating the training for us. and just providing some technical assistance as we go through it. I'd say today's meeting was a lot better than the first couple of meetings. The first few times we were sort of in 100 directions, but we will be digital this coming February 4th is the date that's been set.
Good. Folks, I have, as we're getting, just before we start the discussion on special town meeting, I was negligent in not actually dealing with our first agenda item, which is the acceptance of our meeting minutes from November 12th and 14th. I'll start with the November 12th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the meetings of November 12th, 2020?
So moved.
Anne has moved, and do I have a second?
Second.
Second,
Kelly seconds. Any discussion on the meeting minutes of November 12th? With that, I'll take a roll call vote. Kelly Numi?
Bob, you're throwing me up here. You're calling
I know,
on
I'm
me
going-
first here. I'm like, I'm getting a little nervous here. Yes, I approve.
All right, I'm going clockwise on my screen.
Okay, cool. At least I know now, so I'm prepared.
Judy?
yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Anne?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes as well. I will now entertain a motion for acceptance of the meeting minutes from December the 14th, 2020.
So moved.
Alan moved
Second,
and
second,
Judy seconds. All right, Kelly, are you ready for me? Roll call vote. Kelly.
I've got my finger on the button now, so yes.
All right. Judy?
yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Anne?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes as well. All right. With that, we can now move into the agenda item for special town meeting. I know that we've seen many of the items before, and I know that this particular document just came in this afternoon to us. Does the commission feel comfortable that with reviewing tonight and voting? Or yes, Ann?
I just have one question. I'm sorry that I was looking at other things today in the last couple of days, and I didn't get a chance to look at this list compared to the list that we were given. Was it in November? And what had changed? That was all. If there was any changes.
I checked. I don't believe there are.
Mr. Chair, item number 20, the overlay, that's new.
Okay.
And then
And we
the
have a little more,
Carolina restoration too, is it not?
The
and
Carolina,
we have the amount for the unpaid bills now.
So the new ones are the overlay, which we did speak to briefly last meeting. The unpaid bills, we have a dollar amount, and Carolina restoration, that is a new item. Was that on the agenda for the back in October when we first were talking about fall town meeting?
it was not, Mr. Chairman. It's a CPA project. It's a follow-up to their project that they started about 1.5 years ago for the Carillon. I've spoken to the CPA. They intend to vote to add it at their meeting, I believe, later this week, but they haven't not yet. So I think if you did approve it, it would be contingent on assuming that they're going to do it, but they've been working towards continuing that project.
Ann?
I have one more question. Has the selectmen voted on this list as it stands now?
They've approved the warrant, so I don't think they're making any changes to the warrant. So yes.
Could just, I know we talked about it briefly at the last meeting, but can we just have a description of the of number 20, the overlay, the 329,635 from free cash to go to the overlay, and just give us some background on the reason for that particular article?
Sure, Tom, if you want me to start, and then I'll leave the details to you since Tom actually files it. Every year when we have to submit what we call our Schedule A to the state and we go to really balance our budget with them, it's a funny process. We actually do that in the fall after we pass a budget. And the overlay, which is your assessor's overlay for uncollectible accounts or for abatements, the state always uses that to get your tax rate to come out to an even number and to always balance. It's just rarely used to an extent this much. But every year when we go to balance a budget, any changes ultimately come out of your overlay, where the state might say, gee, you said $55,000 in local receipts. We only think it's 52. So we're going to adjust your overlay and make it 52. I don't really know why they do it, but it's how they do it. This year, the state had said, go ahead with your last year's receipts for local receipts when we passed the budget in June. And then come October, when we went to submit Schedule A, they said, no, you can't do that. That's not, you know, you need to lower your receipt numbers. After we have it in an email, they said, sure, this seems fine. So their response is, well, it's fine to balance your budget. Those are going to get reduced, and we're going to reduce your overlay by $330,000. That's too much to reduce the overlay by for us to feel comfortable. We had worked to get the overlay to a little over $1 million, and this brings it back up to that $1,040,000 number for the overlay. Tom, do you want to fill anything in that I missed?
So the only thing I would add to that is, had we known what their official position is, we just would have reduced our estimate of revenues before the November town meeting, and we would have increased how much free cash we would be using to balance the budget. So, you know, we're just increasing that amount, basically balance the budget.
And which revenue source was it? Was the hotel or meals?
It was the hotel motel tax.
Which, if you, that means the total number of free cash we would have used in this budget is closer to what we were sort of predicting over the summer. And I don't disagree with the state decided to do. It's just they sort of said, no, you're good. And then they came back and said, no, on second thought, this is how we think we should do it.
Kelly has a question, and then Alan. Kelly, then Alan.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, Tony and Tom, the net impact is just we're going to take this $320 some odd thousand out of our free cash. So that's less for us to put in our reserve fund or whatever we were going to do with the rest of the free cash. Is that basically the impact?
Correct, because if the overlay account that we're putting it into were to run short, we'd have to do that anyway. It's one of those required expenses that if we ran out of money for abatements, they make you come up with money for abatements.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Alan has a question.
Thanks, Bob. You know, as you know, remember that the FinCom did have some concerns about the numbers when we approved them in the budget, you know, primarily meals tax as well as hotel motel. And I guess the numbers are what they are. However, I think, you know, I could say without fear of contradiction that we're going to look very closely during this upcoming budget cycle at what those numbers will be, so we don't have a similar situation you know, hit us anytime next year.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. It's because we're I guess that's a particular revenue item that's highly influenced or impacted rather by our current pandemic. So we may find ourselves in a similar situation when we're estimating revenues going forward. But hopefully again, to the earlier agenda or opening comments by Tony, hopefully the light is at the end of the tunnel. But yeah, we need to keep that in mind. Are there any other questions on the overlay or any other item? Anything else people want to discuss on the list? Because yes, Ann. You're muted.
Yep. I'm going to make a suggestion that since the selectmen have not actually voted on this, I know they voted on a warrant, but that doesn't mean that they're voting on where this money is, and they have voted on where the money is coming from and all that sort of stuff. And so I think that we may want to discuss this and may want to decide to vote maybe just before the meeting or something, because we normally wait until after we have a vote from the selectmen. Does anybody know if the selectmen have this on an agenda or what? Because this is not the normal course. So what's going on?
I would think that with perhaps the exception of the overlay and unpaid bills, every one of the items, well, maybe not the Carillon, but certainly the 1 through 1, 2, 3, all the CPA, all those were on the warrant for the original town meeting. So
it's $380,000 plus that they hadn't voted on.
Correct. I mean, here's the thing, they could specifically discuss the Carillon and the overlay, and the the Carillon and the overlay. That being said, the Carillon is an extension of an existing project, and the overlay is the overlay. We're doing that one way or another. Not to say that it's a fait accompli. One way or another, we're paying that 330 grand. So you could wait. The only concern is, I know that yellow sheets are tending to go out, but you have 3 or 4 weeks before the town meeting, so you can meet again next week or the week after. It's really your
We have
call.
to do so, we might. Yeah.
Kelly?
Just a suggestion, folks.
So I hear what Ann's saying, and I can totally see that point. Would it be possible for us to vote on it as is, and then if there's changes that the selectmen don't approve, then we could come back for a vote just so we can get a vote in on it? And then if there's no changes, we don't have to revote. That would be my suggestion, because I understand Ann's point, but I understand we also, some of these items are in the original warrant and the amounts haven't changed, right? So they are what they are.
I think
Is
it's a good
that
idea.
fair?
I like the idea too. I mean, certainly we could come back, but my one hesitation is that, not that we do have some time between now and February 4th, but I suspect that given the upcoming Zoom webinar training and perhaps some Q&As that may be established, I'm a little concerned that we may have difficulty fitting in meetings in and around those schedules. And I think with the exception of the Carillon and the overlay, I think everything else has been pretty well vetted. And to Kelly's point, I think we could vote on the overlay and the Carillon with the stipulation that we're assuming Board of Selectmen approval, or words to that effect. Alan, then Tom.
Thanks, Bob. I mean, I understand Ann's point. The reality is that the FinCom is the board with the responsibility to take a position on financial articles for town meetings. So it's always nice to know how the selectmen will vote on these. But the reality is, according to the charter, that the FinCom is the board that has the responsibility to make those recommendations to town meeting. So I would support moving forward at this point.
Tom?
Thank you. I would agree to vote tonight, because it'd be a lot easier for you to get the pink sheets out in a timely manner. And I did make one mistake on this spreadsheet, at least from what I intended to do. Article 24, unpaid bills. My intention really was to have this paid from other departmental funds. So if the fire department is submitting 2 unpaid bills, that I think they should pay for that out of this year's money. That was my intention. Tony and I did not discuss this, but that's traditionally what we do. So if the FinCom agreed, we would just be moving that 12,063 out of free cash column here into the other column.
So
And my other procedural thing, Mr. Chairman, if you are going to vote tonight or later, some other time, you might want to consider, if there's no dissension on where any of these things you might want to vote as a block, since you have to do a roll call vote for each one, for each time you vote.
Yeah, I was thinking that we could do, that's a good suggestion. If we do vote, I was going to suggest that we could certainly take like the CPC funds and just vote them as a block. And the others can be voted individually. And when we get to unpaid bills, when the vote is established, we can identify that change in the source for unpaid bills. So consensus, folks. Judy, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, we do have a selectman here, David. Could I ask David what his thoughts are?
Well, while we didn't specifically vote the overlay unpaid bills or the Carillon, we pretty much knew what it was when we voted overall in support of the entire warrant. We did talk about the overlay because I believe Tim gave us a short proposal about what that was all about and why we had the shortfall. So I would agree that unless the selectmen come back and specifically tell you that they disagree with a number that they hadn't seen, I think it would be okay with what Kelly had said, and just say yes, unless the selectmen come back with a different request to the Finance Commission.
So the assessor has seen this or has been part of putting that number together?
Yes, to the best of my knowledge, yes, because of
That's correct.
what he told us about the shortfall.
Okay, thank you.
Ann?
Okay, so the unpaid bills are going to be paid from departmental,
Actually, my recommendation would be to pay those out of free cash as it's the middle of the year. One of the bills there is $8,000 or $9,000, and last fiscal year, George's department turned over a little bit of free cash. So this is just money that should have gotten spent, but got put back to free cash, and the bills came in late. Usually at the end of the year, we look to take the things out of other departmental receipts, but it's we're halfway into the fiscal year. So if we go whack George's budget for $12,000 at the end of this year, we're just going to be looking to come back somewhere else for that. If it's the end of the year, we can usually say, hey, you know what? This account here doesn't have money. This account here doesn't have money. The middle of the year, it's a little bit tougher for unpaid bills. I mean, we can make it work. It just probably wouldn't be the fire department that we take it from.
okay. It was just a little concerning for me. I didn't know where we were as far as our other accounts for both, for most of the departments, and the fire department in particular, because of the length of runs that they're doing now and that sort of thing, whether they're running out of money. It must be tight.
It certainly is. So if we did take it from somewhere in the budget, it'd be coming from somewhere else. And still, free cash is probably the best solution on this side of the winter. On the other side of the winter, we'll know where snow and ice is. We'll know, have an idea of where trash is. Some of those larger accounts that we can always pull money from. But I would agree with you, Ann, that it's my recommendation wouldn't be the fire department budget this at this point in the middle of the year. I know we have a reserve transfer coming at some point for the elevator. It hasn't come yet because the cost just continues to go up. But that'll be a $10,000 or $12,000 repair at a minimum of the elevator. So it's six one way, half a dozen another way. But I think the fire department budget line wouldn't be able to absorb that.
I've
Okay.
always said that elevator costs always go up, Tony. Well, I guess we don't want to resolve the two sources between you and Tom. Tom, are you okay with the presentation of the?
I have an affinity for my boss, so I obviously subconsciously put it into free cash. So I'm fine with it.
And Finance Commission members, would you like to just vote them as a block, or should we do line by line with CPA being all together and the rest stand on their own for a vote? Alan?
Thanks, Bob. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the entire list as noted on the screen, the amounts, the various buckets of money as noted. A total of $913,477, of which excuse me a second. 669,179 of free cash, other 244,298.
Do I have a second? Kelly seconds. Okay. With that, we'll go to a roll call vote, and I'm going to go first to Kelly.
Yes.
Judy?
Yes,
Alan?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So the articles for the special town meeting pass unanimously. Very good. Moving on. I think now we can move to the agenda in order. I think the next item for discussion is free cash. And I know that Tom sent us some information this afternoon, sort of the summary of where we are at free cash and where we anticipate we could be, and possible proposed uses of free cash going forward at the annual meeting later. So, Tom, I'm going to turn it over to you for the presentation of the information on screen.
So earlier in the year, in November, we had free cash certified of $8,725,025. People will remember that that's unusually high for us. It's because we purposely did not spend a lot of free cash, especially on capital items last year, because we knew we would need free cash because of the COVID crisis. So that number was higher than usual, $8,725,000. At the November town meeting, we used $1,185,158 of specific for specific items related to the hybrid learning model and the related unemployment costs, et cetera. And then overall, we had that number that we were still short, and we used that to plug the budget gap, 618,232. So as of today, we have 6,921,635. And then Mr. Mizuko kind of laid out a plan of, in general, you know, what he thinks we should do with free cash. So I'll just put this up on the screen, and maybe Tony can.
Sure. So there's been some discussion. Oh, I think Ann has a question.
Ann?
Yeah, but you haven't taken off the $669,179 that we just voted on. Oh, there it is on this. Okay, I got it on the sheet. Thank you. I didn't want to miss that. Thank you.
So Tom, you'll scroll a little bit. There's been quite a bit of discussion about free cash, and we are sitting on a large free cash number, larger than normal. We made some decisions. Where are we in that process? So I've sort of sketched out where I think we would want to go, and I'll go through each of these items and then take a few questions and explain them, because I will apologize. This is just a rough sketch, and it's aligned according to how the things look in my mind, which is not always how they look in the real world. The first two items would be a proposal to pay for the debt and operations of Forbes Hill out of free cash, as the Finance Commission has previously voted. This year, we don't have the benefit of a forfeited deposit to cover the majority of that cost. We certainly could continue to operate it, absorb it in the operating budget. That would take $800,000 away from the available operating budget. Now, Forbes Hill, it is in some minor litigation at the moment. We are hopeful that we would sell before we would need to make an appropriation. That being said, with town meeting being in May, today is January 11th. I would like to go ahead with the assumption that we need to budget for that payment. If we're not able to sell the property by next December, we have to make that payment. So we have some time to be able to make the sale of the property, but being cautious and saying, let's be prepared and not having to scramble is always the best option. The note came in relatively cheap. If we are able to sell Forbes Hill, two things can happen. Or one of them is we simply don't need to make that payment. We could appropriate it to stabilization or the pension fund. Also, remember, when we do sell Forbes Hill, because we've made one payment already, assuming it goes for around the price of the last bid, there'll be a net gain to free cash that year of probably anywhere between $700,000 and $1.2 million when we sell it, because it's going to sell for 13 or 13.5, and now I believe we're down to around 12.3 or 12.5 actually owing on the property. I'm going to pop back to the balanced budget number for a minute, because that's a little bit more complicated. Use for stabilization fund, that will be my recommendation. Of any way you look at it, we do have a decent amount of free cash. Let's put about 10% of what's left into stabilization. Just put it in there. That plus our regular allocation that we would make, that's in the budget of $428,000, gets us very much closer to our 5% goal and gets us to where we wanted to be when we borrowed for the DPW building. And that snow and ice item down there, as well as an additional $500,000, that's just a maybe. We don't know what's going to come up with snow and ice. We were good last year. We added money in the override. We'll hopefully be good this year. But just as we frame what we're going to do with free cash, we need to understand you always need to hold on to some in case there's an issue with snow and ice. And as well, we don't know what's going to come up in the spring. We could have expenses that we need to look at free cash for. So the number down there, proposed use at fall special town meeting, 1.5 million. That's to go towards capital. Remember that we told town meeting, and folks even asked at town meeting that, you know, gee, we're borrowing a lot. And the idea would be, as long as everything's okay, the following year, we would do a lot less borrowing, preferably none, and spend more cash than we normally would on capital. But we can't rely on generating all of that after this year. So some of this amount, we need to put our head in our minds and say, okay, we need to sort of put that aside, at least in our mind, because we're going to need probably $3 million worth of cash capital in the fall, assuming we move the capital plan to the fall, which is going to be the CPC, Capital Outlay Chair's recommendation that we move it to the fall. And we wouldn't necessarily want to spend $15 million in November and then come back with an $8 million capital plan 6 months later in May. We can certainly hold it off. But we're probably going to need about $3 million worth of cash for that capital plan, because we did tell town meeting, and I think we should be consistent, that more borrowing this year to be offset by very little borrowing the following year. Now, that balanced the budget number, if we use that number to plug it in, and there's a specific reason I want to plug it in, I guess I'll start with that reason. I don't know if we're going to get a state aid number in a reasonable amount of time again this year. The governor might release his number in late January. The House may follow along. The Senate may follow along. I'm just not confident that's going to happen for a couple of reasons. One, I think they're still waiting to see if anything shakes out at the federal level. We keep sort of waiting and waiting and waiting. And, you know, we know how the election turned out, and we know how the stimulus package turned out. There wasn't any funding directly available for cities and towns and states, but CARES Act funding is carried over. There is a change in the Senate. There's a change in the White House. So I think there's still going to be a little bit of wait and see attitude. I don't think the state's going to have accurate revenue numbers. They're sort of all over the place. They predicted, you know, $4 to $6 billion. It came in at, you know, $1.6 billion. They used some stabilization. They didn't really include any broad-based tax increases, but the state is spending money. And let's face it, there are some months where the sales tax is up 8, 10, 12%, and they can't figure out why it's up so high. And DOR keeps cautioning, don't worry, it's not going to last. It's not going to last, which I would agree with. But it's also a matter of some of their collections are up and some of them are down. They'll know where the income tax is when there's filing for unemployment as people start to do their taxes. So that all sort of coalesces around, I don't think we're going to have a reliable number from the state anytime again. And I don't know if we want to play the game we did last year where, you know, is it going to be April? Is it going to be May? Is it going to be June? So using that free cash to balance the budget would say that we look at our revenues, we would adjust local receipts down to a reasonable number and just say, look, the heck with what the state's telling us. Let's use a reasonable conservative number, plug in the regular levy increase that we always do, and then just leave state aid flat. It rarely, if ever, goes down. Education aid actually can't go down, although Blue Hills will have a large increase, which might also shift our aid numbers. There's some uncertainty there. Blue Hills increase is actually about 10%, but that's for another meeting. We leave it flat, and then whatever the delta is between what we get in state aid and that number, you reduce that number by. And certainly that's projected that, you know, all shared costs come in at 5% and both budgets come in at 3.5%. I assume that they'd come in a little bit less, so you'd reduce the number by that. Think of it as breathing room. The remaining free cash that we don't use out of that could go into the pension fund, could go into stabilization, or could just be left for free cash for the following year. But I think if we're going to try to balance a budget this year, I'm just not relying. I don't know when we're going to get reliable numbers from the state. Real quick, the GIC is another example of, they've told us to prepare for a 4% increase. Health insurance companies are issuing rebates. I don't know how our rates are going to go up 4% in a year when we should be getting a rebate, but there's a heck of a lot of uncertainty there. So this at least sort of frames out, it allows us to have some numbers to build a balance on, sort of use the free cash as a swing. The budget would go forward, including the $700,000 deposit into override stabilization, which in year 3, our original plan was to have 0 going in. So now we would be putting in $700,000. And as a result of doing that, we'd have about $2.6 million in override stabilization. So going forward to not FY22, but FY23, the first thing we would do is remove that deposit from the budget. And then whatever a gap we have, we plug with override stabilization, which was already part of our plan. We should have more than enough, absent a recession, to get us through year 4 and 5 of the override conservatively, and possibly even more beyond that. So could you make that number 1.8 million and take out that override stabilization account? Sure, but I always like to say leave that deposit in there as long as you possibly can to extend make sure that the override lasts at least 5 years, if not even longer. So more or less, that's my my bit.
Mhm.
I'd be happy to take any questions anyone has or facilitate any discussion.
Let's go first to Judy.
Yeah, I have a question relative to the Forbes. What is the status of that?
It's currently being litigated, and there's a decision, hopefully, from a court in the next month or two. The challenge there is you always hope that courts will say this is exactly what's going to happen, and sometimes they issue a decision, somebody appeals the decision. I can chat with you offline about specifically which court it's in front of, but there's discovery going on now, and all sides are presenting their case to a judge because on the good hand, on the positive side, there's a lot of interest in the property and everyone wants it. It's just several developers are fighting it out because they all think they should be front in line.
Okay.
Bob, I think
Yeah, you can go.
Tony, when did you say that Forbes debt is due?
well, we should, in theory, our payment is next, I'd say November to make it on time. So we need to ensure we have an appropriation to do it. So could we wait for the fall? We could wait for the fall. I would feel really, 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 really uncomfortable going into a fiscal year, knowing that I have a debt payment due in that fiscal year and we haven't planned for it. That can also cause an impact on your bond rating if somebody were to dig into that and realize that you basically weren't planning on paying your debt. Now, we could have a resolution by March 15th. It goes away. We don't need to do it.
So, okay. So this is for the annual town meeting, and we're going to do the $800,000 for Forbes to be paid in November, but we're paying this out of something that would have been free cash, would have gone to free cash, but it has to be certified
No, so in the
because
current
it's being
year,
spent in the next year.
no, it doesn't. Once you've appropriated it, it moves from your free cash account to that appropriate.
All right.
But to your point, it's a very good point, actually. If we waited until October, we would have to have had free cash certified if we do it next year. And while we should have plenty of free cash, we can never predict it. You can close a year with $5 million and end up with negative free cash. It is possible. Unlikely, but possible.
Alan?
Thanks, Bob. Just a quick question for Tony on Forbes operations, because I thought that we had mothballed the building, so I'm just wondering what the costs of $75,000 represent.
The bare minimum of insurance and utilities and a couple of service contracts for items we have to keep on the building. It is effectively mothballed. We're not allowing access to the building. It's deteriorating rapidly, but there's still some costs to maintaining it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
So I'm glad to see the stabilization fund ending up in the column for expenditure for free cash. According to our financial policies, any year that we have free cash that's in excess of 5 million, we should consider concentrating funding the excess to stabilization fund and OPED or the pension fund. So I think I'm very happy with that. Now, with the 700,000 being funded from the stabilization, what would there also be an additional contribution or appropriation on the operating budget for stabilization fund, or is this replacing that?
No, it's not replacing it. My recommendation is that $428,000 line item in the budget probably needs to stay in there in perpetuity. Let's say we had a really good year and we put a ton of money into stabilization. We got to that 5% of fund balance that we'd always like to get to. You still need to put money into the budget to maintain it. So instead of that being a catch up, once we're at that level, we leave that number in the budget, and that ensures we're always going to be at that 5% of fund balance, because the budget will grow a couple $1 million a year over time. And if we're not putting anything into stabilization, we've already got that built into the base budget, keep that in there. So the total amount we would add next year, if we went with this and let's say we had to spend everything else, would be 700,000 plus 428,000. So about 1.1 million going into stabilization.
We may want to consider the 428 just rising annually with whatever the budget increase is.
That's not a bad idea either.
So if we have a 3.5% increase to the budget, the 428 should go up. That way it remains a constant percentage of the budget move, if you will. So
Very smart idea.
Anne has a question.
Yeah, one of the things that I looked at today was because of the stabilization fund, was the old MOU for the light department and the payback on the, and I'm sorry, I need a magnifying glass to look at this piece of paper. So it's very small, but it was how we were paying back from the light department to the general government and to the stabilization fund. And I believe 2021 was the last year that we were supposed to have made that payment to pay them back. So I wanted to just sort of see what kind of thoughts that you had on that and where we were going. And I'm assuming that has indeed been paid back, right, Tom?
So wait, Ann, can you just clarify? Are you talking about light department or the public works department?
Oh, I'm sorry, Public Works.
Yeah, I thought it was FY20. I'll defer to Tom. I thought FY23 was when we'd be back at the level we wanted to be at. Is that correct, Tom?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure, but he thinks 21, you think 23, and I thought it was 22. But I agree with Tony's point that whether we've completed our obligation at the end of 21 or 22 or 23, we should continue some amount like that. And I like Bob's idea of increasing that a little bit over time. Because, before we had this repayment thing, we used to put money in the stabilization fund anyway.
Yeah. My recollection is, I think, oh, by the way, Tom, so we, kind of related to stabilization. So I know that we had the pause items. The stabilization fund was one of the pause items. Have we affected the pause, that is to fund stabilization and the other two accounts? Have they been funded and not on pause anymore from the
Correct.
FY22 appropriation? Good.
Correct.
Good. All right. Are there any other questions about free cash? I mean, we're going to have more time to be looking at free cash as circumstances change and we go forward. And, Judy, yes.
Yeah, the use of this free cash, as Tony has outlined here, proposed to use at the annual town meeting. But as we are going through the budget process, will we actually do the assignment of this during the budget process? So at town meeting, we would then present this as part of the budget, correct?
Yes, that would be my recommendation, with that $2.5 million number being the moving target. I expect some sort of an increase in state aid. My thought is it's either going to take us a while to get there or we just don't know what it is. So at some point we would move through with these projections. Forbes Hill, that number is set. The balanced budget number will change, but at least saying early on we think that's the number we're going to plug in lets us build a budget and go through the budget process. The snow and ice number could be zero, could be twice that. But that will be my guess, is my recommendation, is we move forward with that assumption so we can actually build a budget based on the model. And then you're backing it down as much as you can on that $2.5 million number. And could be a bad year, could be a great year.
So if we do not use some of that money as outlined here, such as we have no snow and we have no ice, we have 500,000, that will just remain where? In free cash to be then appropriated to be put into stabilization or something?
It's your call. We could leave it in free cash to make sure we carry over a good free cash number and always give ourselves sort of a little bit of a buffer to see what we want to do. It could go to stabilization, could go to the pension fund.
And that would apply to Forbes too. If we were able to clear that property and have it for sale, that money would be available to remain.
Absolutely. And I mean, that could be something where it closes May 10th and we're at town meeting the next night saying, no, we don't need to do this. Let's change it and dump it in the pension fund or throw it in stabilization, or you could hold on to all that free cash and next year really do all of your capital with cash. You know, maybe there's $1.5 million project that we're looking to do and say, you know what, we are going to pay everything out of cash this year because we said we would. So we have a year with a lot of borrowing and then a year with no borrowing. So that's really your sort of your prerogative as we navigate through.
Okay, thank you.
Tony, I have on the question of the proposed use of fall 2021 special town meeting, the capital. So 1.5 million free cash. I'm envisioning that focus of that capital will be on things such as those small design contracts that and maybe some vehicle purchases, so we keep them off the borrowing line.
Really everything. So what I'd like to do for next fall is have $3 million in cash to pay for items on the capital plan, so we're not borrowing for them. There may be, and we're still going to settle out the plan, a couple of items that are larger items that you would borrow for. The HVAC system at the public safety might come up. Now, the work on the high school field is supposed to be in there, but I think with COVID and everything, that might get delayed. But I'd like to pay for the bulk of our plan that we would be borrowing for, at least to borrow against the general fund for, out of cash. So I need that $1.5 million and probably another $1.5 million. And it would be a year where we're doing more capital out of cash than we normally would, but it's to offset that year where we did more borrowing than we normally did. Sort of being, you know, the FinCom's goal to be prudent and say, let's take a look at this. Well, by this fall, we'll have been through COVID. We'll know where we are. Whatever the budget is, it is what it is. So now we can say, well, we've got that extra free cash. We held on to it. Now it's time to use it. That being said, if you wanted to borrow for everything in the fall and throw that money in stabilization, that's certainly something you could do too.
Okay. And Haley?
In this discussion, we're losing the sight that we normally do have some free cash that we have certified during the summer by November to use.
Mm-hmm.
And we use it. I don't know. I think.
So, and I think if you look at that bottom line, if everything Tony wanted to do was used up, we would have before that fall town meeting $1,752,000. So that would be our carryover number, and then we generally generate $3 to $4 million of new additions to free cash. So that number before the fall town meeting would really be $1,752,000 plus
the other free cash.
Right.
Right.
So our free cash policy, we have to carry, we plan to carry over a minimum of 500,000 in free cash, but this plan would have us looking at 1.7.
Right.
Correct.
And then if we did generate 4 million additional, it would have, 5.7 million, and Tony's proposing 3 million of that go towards capital.
Okay.
Or cash is always.
Yeah. And when do you anticipate capital outlay would start to have the need to meet to review projects based on this new timeline?
So assuming capital outlay decides, and the chairman wants to, and I've talked to a few of them, assuming they decide they want to go with the new timeline, we'd be looking at an appropriation in October, November, like we did this year. The goal being to let capital outlay really start in the spring, maybe right after town meeting, and really dig into some of these projects. We lump it in with the annual budget process, and it's, oh God, we got to do the town budget, we got to do the school budget, and that capital stuff. So we really want to give the capital outlay committee time to really dig into the projects, go view some of the projects, and really get a part of the process and make that sort of the centerpiece of the fall town meeting. So that way it's not just, especially because of the way capital outlay is, you got members of the FinCom and the school committee, or some from the public and some from the selectmen, that they're all trying to get town meeting ready and doing capital on the side like it's a side gig for all of us. And it's not, it's important. It's actually where a lot of our money gets spent every year. A preliminary look at the plan next year, I can get a shout out to everyone in a couple days of what it looks like based on what we have in the plan this year. But of course, departments have to adjust those items and they go up or down. We'll start that process somewhat in conjunction with the annual budget process, but really hit it hard about a month after town meeting, hoping that they do their work June, July, August, into September, and then we're presenting things to all the different boards and committees September, October for late October or early November approval.
Thank you, Tony. Are there any other questions or comments about the free cash discussion? I see David.
Yep. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just to piggyback on discussion of when we'll know what certain numbers will end up being. I would say on this list, the snow and ice and the FY22 budget need, by the time we get to town meeting, we will definitely know about the ice, whether we need the additional $500,000 or not. And we may have a decent idea of what the FY22 state aid will be, again, by the time we're at town meeting, because we'll either know whether we're going to be really low because of where we are with the governor. They are both, like the Senate and the House, love to beat the governor to giving more money. So we'll really know. I would hope that our priority would be if we could make an adjustment before town meeting to deal with the pension fund, would be to put some money in this year if we have a decent number coming out of snow and ice in the balance 22. I would hope we would try to put additional money into the pension fund for fiscal year 22 before, instead of waiting till November.
Yeah, I think just briefly, I think David's right. We'll probably know firm numbers for a lot of these around town meeting. I think the challenge is we may not know a lot of them until late April, early May, and at that point we have to have sort of already planned on a budget to get out. But I would assume by the day we walk into town meeting, we'll reasonably know Forbes, reasonably know that balance number, and then snow and ice will definitely know by then. So I think he's right. There might be some last minute additions. And there's nothing to say that the FinCom and the selectmen, everyone don't meet in June and make decisions, and we'll know roughly where we are by then. David's absolutely right.
Very good. Thank you, David. Any other comments? Seeing none, and I think what we can do then is to go on to the next agenda item. And this is an update from the Middle School Building Committee. And Alan Slater, who is the chair of the building committee, can give us an update and provide us information, especially regarding the, you have an upcoming meeting, Alan, I know, this week that you want to speak to, I'm sure.
We do, Bob. Thank you. Middle School Building Committee, is involved in a number of meetings and presentations. We just had a regular committee meeting a little bit earlier this afternoon, and we took a vote to recommend that the present Coakley site be the site of the new project. Now that doesn't say, where it's going to be located on the site, or whether it's a vertical building or a horizontal building, but just that when everything is said and done, among the choices we had, which was to look at Forbes Hill or Hennessy Field or the Sabat Center as alternate sites, so we all felt that the Coakley was the preferable site, and we took a position on that. And now our consultant AI3 can go in and do its technical presentation. It's specific site planning based on that. So that's good news. The plan is to complete a report by July, which will have a recommendation, not only where the site is, but what the educational plan is, and whether we're going to go with a 5 through 8 and a 6 through 8 building. Then we'll do some further work or schematic design so that we can present that to MSBA, and MSBA beginning of 2022 can hopefully make a decision voting us into the program and giving us a hard number that they'll fund, a specific dollar number. At that point, we would then go to the voters, we go to town meeting, and we go to the ballot, because it's likely to be a debt exclusion, to see whether the townspeople would support that or not. So we have a lot of work to do. We're moving forward. This Thursday, 7 o'clock, we're having the first of our community forums. We intend to have a number of those during the process. And I think it's really just to introduce a lot of people, to the project, where we are right now. So where we've been, what the need of the project is, where we're going, as well as to solicit some input and some questions from people. Where are their concerns? Are there concerns with how a building is situated on the site? Are there concerns with whether we have a 5th grade versus a 6th grade at the building? Do they have issues on cost? so on and so forth. So I think that's something that we're really looking forward to. We want to get the public involved every step of the way. We want to know what their concerns are so we can react to them and make changes to the plan accordingly. And if you want to look at on the town website, I believe there's a link to that meeting. We're also in the process of developing a website, which is a work in progress, but that's certainly being developed and will be expanded in the future. But if you go to the link for the flyer for the session, there's also a link that you're going to have to press that'll register you for that meeting, so you can participate in that meeting. We already have 45 people who've registered, which is good. We expect to get more, and we're excited for that and to solicit input. So things are moving along smoothly. Right now it's on schedule, and right now we're on schedule to hopefully begin construction in the summer of 2023 and complete it 2 years later. So that's where we're at.
So it seems so far away, not so long ago, and now it seems like it's almost at our doorstep.
Yeah, we're excited. There's still a lot of work to do. We got to finalize, how the building is to be situated on the property. It's likely to be a new building, although you still have to look at, add reno and repair in accordance with MSBA requirements. We don't know what the dollar figure is yet, but we're getting there. And I think, the other thing to keep in mind, excuse me, is that the team that we have here of AI3 as our architect and Compass as our OPM were the same ones who brought us the middle school, which was on time and on budget. And I think that's something that, Norwood people, really take seriously. So we're certainly pleased with our project team.
Excellent. Any comments, questions coming out of the commission regarding the middle school project? Encourage everyone to, yes, Kelly.
I just wanted to say thank you, Alan, for the update, and thank you for all the work you're doing with the committee on the project. I know it's a really big project, so thank you for all the time and effort you're putting in. I think you guys are making excellent progress. I'm super excited to see the construction start.
Thank you. And thank you from the commission standpoint as well. Just having you serve both as a member of our commission as well as the chair of the building committee is, I just think, a great combination for us to keep on top of the project. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
All right, moving through the agenda. I think what we wanted to do, last time we met, we had the budget calendar for initial review last month, and I don't know, Tony, Tom, I don't know if you guys have had any updates to the calendar. If not, I think we can open it up for just general discussion.
We really haven't done any work on the calendar.
All right.
Bob?
Yes, just one thing.
When they had the calendar the last time, or Tony's suggestion of a calendar, that was, I couldn't find that in my packet. So I didn't, when I started looking at the calendars today, I didn't have anything to go by. So I was wondering, Tom, if you could get a copy of the proposed or almost proposed calendar.
That we can do. I apologize. I think the hard copy that I have was from a discussion Tony and I had closer to Thanksgiving, and that certainly was a preliminary one, which basically we're looking at somewhere in the middle of March to have the budget review and approval of numbers at the BBC. However, there are a lot more dates that need to be filled in. And one thing I think we need to probably keep in mind as a FinCom, last year was kind of an odd year in many ways. I think, if my recollection is correct, we consolidated our normal processes, our meetings rather, with budget, department head budget reviews. We usually have the folks come in, present their budget, have the formal hearing, and so forth. And I think we really consolidated that approach last year because of our situation with the pandemic. We were not having physical meetings. So one thing I just want to keep in mind, and we'll talk to Tony and Tom as we go along, is now that we have virtual meetings, just to make sure that we have some FaceTime with the department directors for budget purposes going forward. That's my opinion. I don't know if other commissioners want to chime in with any other thoughts.
I'll say something.
Bob?
Let's go with Judy, then Ann.
Yeah, okay.
I agree with you 100%. I was hoping we wouldn't be on virtual at that time. We'd be all done and everybody would be back to normal, but that would be a good alternative to go with virtual if we had to.
Okay, Ann?
Since I was chair last year at that time, I had sent a letter out, not a letter, email out to folks saying that that we were waiving that interviewing of the department with the department heads, or chats with the department head, however you want to put it, for one time only. And there is someplace in my files, there's an email regarding that. So just I think it's an important part of the process, is that we have to understand and defend, when we're at town meeting, the reason that we voted the way we did, and we can do that in a better way after having talked to people affected.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? If not, we can move on. Seeing none, we can. So I believe we're down to these two items, and revolving accounts, and then the facilities department discussion. So, Ann, I'm gonna defer to you for the discussion on revolving accounts, if I could, as you've been advocating for this information. So I'll turn it over to Ann for discussion.
Okay. About this time last year, I had requested some information on revolving accounts and also on grants that we had, and where we were with the grants, and if there were any grants that were going to drop off and that sort of thing. We don't have a lot of grants, but we do have, from my past experience, quite a number of revolving accounts. Now, these are revolving accounts. I'm calling them revolving accounts. I don't know the technical name at this point, because we do have two revolving accounts that we get from reports from yearly by law. But we have a number that were that came into existence way before the library and the senior centers revolving accounts. So I'd like a list of the names of the accounts, what is in the accounts, what the accounts are used for, and who can use them. Because they don't come before us, if I am correct, Mr. McQuaid, they don't come before us for people to expend out of them, do they? They're not in the budget.
They're not in the budget. And of course, the budget is your purview.
Yes.
So just to clarify, Ann, we have had this review with the schools, though.
Yes.
Because I think Karen presented this detail, I think, somewhere within the last 3 or 4 months, when we had the school committee in.
Yeah, she did a great job with that. Yeah.
So basically, we know that there is a revolving fund at the library. We know there's a revolving fund at the senior center. Are you looking, and so in terms of your requests, do you need the use and who can use from the library and the senior center? Or are you focused mostly on revolving?
No, the other funds that are not the library and the senior center, but we get the reports from the library and the senior center.
Okay.
There are others though. And the reason I'm asking is that there have been times in the past that we have used those revolving funds to help us balance the budget. And, you know, so say there's a revolving fund for planting trees. And, you know, we normally have some trees and planting trees in the budget, but now this particular year, we don't have enough money. So the revolving fund could take care of the planting trees. So this is where I'm going on this. I think it's behooves us to know if there is any other way that we can fund some things.
And I think your request just is the data collection in terms of, we know the library, we know the senior center. Are there any other revolving funds? If so, what are the funds? What department? What are their uses? What are the, I guess, for lack of a better word, the restrictions to usage? And who can use them? Are you talking about who controls the fund? Who's authorized to put money in or spend from it?
Yes.
Okay.
So the only fund I know about is the Recreation Revolving Fund, which is controlled by the Recreation Department. And it's used to fund programs that they want to run.
Judy, do you have any recollection of other funds?
I think Tom is right. Well, I know Tom is right relative to the recreation. In fact, that was really scrutinized when I think David was doing the report down there. And there was some decisions made on how they used it down there. I'm not aware of any other funding or revolving accounts.
Maybe I am thinking of, maybe they're not considered revolving accounts, but there are accounts that are identified for specific uses, correct?
You mean that don't show up anywhere on our financials or any of the reports that comes out of our director
It
of
doesn't show
finance?
up on our budget reports, no.
So for instance, you're talking about the cemetery has a perpetual fund that might whatever, I don't know how much is in there, but let's say it's $500,000, but nobody can touch it because it's a perpetual fund. And then they might have a fund, they have a separate fund for the interest that's accumulated in it. So I don't know how much is in there, but let's say there's 80,000 in there. So you're looking for a fund like that?
Yes, and funds that somebody decides that they want to donate funds for benches, park benches. They give you a check and they say they want it for a park a bench. I know that there are small accounts that have those types of donations in them. Maybe they're called donation accounts. Judy, I know that you remember.
I'm sure we can run you a report.
Pardon me?
I'm sure we can run you a report.
Okay, thank you.
And maybe in addition to running the report, I'm gathering from this discussion is that perhaps the rec department has something that is most similar to what the library and the senior center have. And with that, maybe we can just ask Travis to just give us the lowdown on how his fund works. Tom, can we make that request to Travis?
Sure.
Thank you. Anything else on revolving accounts? Last item for business tonight is the facilities department. I had it listed as allocation of FY22 budget expenses. So, and I think this is something you've been, you asked to put on the agenda as well. So I'll turn it over to you.
Well, the facilities department plus Mr. McQuaid and a few others are meeting tomorrow And I just wanted to let everybody know that they're meeting tomorrow so that then there will be hopefully at some point in time, a new MOU between the school department, the facilities department, and general government. And this is the beginning of the end. You know, it's going to be a significant change for the school department at any rate. And a different way of doing our budgets. And I think that's an important thing to look at while we go forward in this, is that we now have 3 separate buckets that we're going to be dealing with as far as budgetary, arrangements and who's going to get what and how. But I just thought it was an important thing to mention, and that it's something that is definitely a step forward in our progress. That's all.
Yeah, my understanding is that meeting is some of Tom's accounting people meeting with Karen from the schools to kind of work out some details in terms of the chart of accounts and how those monies will be dispersed appropriately.
So I'll just give you a general overview. So where the schools are going to, they have $4.8 million worth of facilities budget. So that's going to be coming over to the facilities department. And then the general government, with the schools combined, the budget is probably going to be $6.5 to $7 million. So that facilities department will be relatively equal in size to the police department or the fire department. So that type of size. So pretty significant number. And the way we designed it, and most of the credit here has to go to Molly and Emily. So basically what we're doing is, if we're taking an electricity budget from, so we'll have a line for electricity. And then what we're going to do is every time we post a cost, we're going to associate the building that it goes with. So that if someone, and same thing for water and, all various categories of things, they'll each be associated with a building. So if someone says, hey, give me all of the facilities costs related to the mulch, we can list it by the, electricity, water, etc. for the mulch. Or if someone says how much for the schools, we can do it for each school individually, or we could do it for the town hall individually, or for the civic. Some of the things we're not bringing over to facilities are things like operation of the pools. So Travis will keep that in recreation. But basically that's a concept. So you'll be able to ask for a report either by, within the facilities department, show us the totals, show us how much did we spend in total for electricity, or give me the breakdown of electricity.
Good. And thank you, Molly and Emily, for that work. That's, taking the concept and putting the parts together is sometimes a challenge as well. So we appreciate the work.
I'll just give you an example, like moving the things from the schools over, pretty easy. But when we're trying to look at, we have one custodian, well, I think we have 2 custodians maybe at the library, but their salaries are buried in with everyone else's salaries in the department. So that's the part that Molly and Emily are now working on the general government side is, what are those 2 salaries worth? And, we're going to pull that number over. So what I've done is I'm going to, this will be another 2 to 3 weeks probably before we're really done with this. But the way I have it set up is I have a detailed budget, the way you usually see a real detailed budget. And then it'll show the amount from last year, and then it'll show a line that says school reclasses. So it'll show amounts where they're coming out of the schools and then where they're going into facilities. And then there'll be another column that says from general government. And so where it's coming out of general government accounts and going into the facilities budget. So that's still 2 or 3 weeks away. You know, you'll have it, I think, before we have the actual town meeting. Not that it's relevant to the town meeting, but whenever you have that meeting close to the town meetings, we'll probably be able to give you a report on that.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. Any other questions, comments in revolving the accounting allocation of expenses for the facilities department? Judy?
Yeah, I don't have any questions per se, but from my feedback I get, the facilities department has been operating very, very well. And I see Kathy's here with us tonight. Thank you for coming. And I know you've had a lot of involvement in this and so forth. Do you have anything to add to it and how things are going and where we expect it to be?
I would have to agree with you, Judy, that it really has been going so well with the facilities department. We're using their School Dude, their software, which is making it easier for us to get to them, notice to them of what work needs to be done. Their crew comes together. They're very well organized. They're able to help out our custodians at town hall as needed. And Chris and Paul, you know, they know exactly what they're doing. They have a plan for any situation that comes up. And I know they're looking into they've already done the LEDs at the library. I think they're done or almost done at the public safety building. I can't say enough about how well they've done in just a few months that they've been in existence. It's like we've always had them, and so many projects are getting done, and they're getting done a lot faster, and they're getting done cheaper by us not having to bring in the contractors. So I'm very, very impressed with their professionalism and with everything they've done. It's been a big help to me so that I don't have to concentrate as much on town hall, and I can do more with COVID purchases and the bids and everything else. So kudos to them. They're doing a really wonderful job.
Great. That reinforces what I've been hearing too, but to hear it from Kathy, that's great news. Thank you, Kathy.
Well, David, looks like one of the initiatives you were a major proponent of is coming along very well. We thank you as well.
Glad to see.
Yeah, and
Great
also
job.
thank David for putting that whole report together. I mean, that was the foundation of getting this done. And of course, Alan, being one of the first chairman of the facilities committee, if I remember right.
Mm-hmm.
It was.
And you were a chairman at one point on the facilities committee, the study.
Mm-hmm.
So
think,
you
Alan,
did a great job. You know, it's been a long time coming, and there's been different phases, and it's really great to see where we are today.
Alan, yes.
I just wanted to also give some kudos to David, you know, for all the hard work he did of putting everything together in a way that, you know, we could understand, that people could see that it was beneficial to everyone in town. So again, kudos for a really good job.
Very good.
Thanks. It was a great team.
Very good. I think we've ended our discussion on that particular agenda item. Before I go on to other business, one thing Tom just mentioned. Tom, do you think there'll be a need for us to at least tentatively post a meeting prior to the February 4th town meeting? Or it's like, for example, will there be a change in the amount for unpaid bills or anything along that line?
Well, you might want to just post one a week before, because then if there are any changes, you could include them into the pink sheets. Or a little bit before, a week before.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll survey offline with the commission for dates the week before town meeting to just post a meeting, get the right date for us, and post a meeting that hopefully we won't have to meet, but it will be on calendar in the event that we do. With that, the last agenda item is there any other business that commissioners want to discuss, bring up? Dan, you're muted.
Take Judy first.
Judy, your hand was up?
It was, didn't mean to be.
Oh,
I
I thought your hand was up. Yeah, a couple of things that I don't want us to lose track of, that we need to review some policies. We don't want to lose track of the fact that we asked, oh, what's the name of them? Hilltop to come back and talk to us. And we might want to, again, start our discussion on the trends and whether the trends that we initially talked about and just thought we wanted to follow were now the things that we do want to continue with and continue to track. So I think that if you can write this down as an agenda item or a couple of agenda items over the next few meetings that we have, that would be great.
That's a good idea. I mean, we did have a lot of discussion around trends and included a couple of pieces of trend information in the budget book. And I certainly, in the context of planning for FY22, revisiting the trend information and determining, how we'd like to update or expand. That's a good agenda item. So point taken.
One more agenda item, the CARES Act, and what we've submitted under the CARES Act and what we've been reimbursed for. And I understand, maybe Tom, you can talk to this, that the CARES Act has been extended, and are there any changes in how you're doing things because of the extension, or how's things going with that?
Well, my understanding is they extended the CARES Act until December 31st, 2021. So, if they, I'm just making this number up, if they gave us $2 million rather than try to figure out how to spend it by this past couple of weeks, or, figure out how to return excess money to them, they've given us more time to spend it, because they understand that the COVID problem is still going to be here for the next 6 months or so anyways.
Okay.
I think a lot of the information regarding the expenditures from CARES is posted on the DLS site as well. So
I did see some, but I thought it was only up to, let me see.
Molly might want to speak to this, because she's the one, she and Emily are the ones who are actually making the reports to the state. And I think perhaps maybe, Molly, you put something up on the town's website?
Sure, I believe the 2 reports that we submitted to the state have been posted on the town website as well for review.
great. Thank you, Molly.
You're welcome.
Good to know. Thank you.
Sure thing.
Any other items for new business? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll make that motion.
Well, I'll take yours as the second and Alan as the first. Alan for motions and Judy seconds. I'll do the roll call. Kelly Newmy to adjourn.
Yes.
Judy Langone,
Yes.
Alan Slater,
Yes.
Ann Haley,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes, so it's unanimous. And thank you, everyone, and have a great evening. And we'll see you soon.
Yep.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.